The following is a CUNY TV special presentation.
I'm going to skip my regular introduction and introduce our senior senator from the state of New York, Chuck Schumer. Chuck, thank you for being here.
Bin Laden wanted to end New York City as we knew it and end Western and American life as we knew it. That was his goal. If you read his statements right after 9/11, it was not just to kill people, but it was that our way of life was bankrupt and he was going to end it. And that is not different than the Hitlers and the Stalins or Khrushchev when he said, "We will bury you." But these great United States always prevail. And I think what happened last night is, in a sense, a turning point in the war on terror. Doesn't mean it's over. But the fact that Bin Laden is dead says to so many would-be terrorists whose minds he had infected with his poison that forget it. His way doesn't work. He's gone, and the United States is here and stronger than ever, and so is Western life. It was not an accident that we didn't allow the Pakistanis to know what was happening. And that's because they're sort of a divided nation. A large portion, particularly in the middle levels of their military, of their intelligence service, has sentimental attachment to the Taliban and even to Al-Qaeda. But there are some indications that Pakistani intelligence helped us here in this successful mission. And it would be typical because they're a divided nation. One hopes that the end of Bin Laden would give the upper hand to those in the Pakistani government and in the Pakistani nation who tend to take our side and want to pursue a path of freedom rather than fundamentalism and terrorism. I spoke this morning to both the people in the FBI and people in Homeland Security, including the head of the Counterterrorism Office for New York City. And they have not detected any pickup, if you will, uptick in threats or events against our city, or for that matter, against our country. You know, we're much better. This did not happen by accident. We're much better at fighting terrorism, and one of the ways we're better is we can basically we know who the terrorists are when they're part of a group, and we can hear what they're saying. And so it's not an accident that, praise God, there haven't been any acts of terrorism against the United States since 9/11. It's because we're much better at it. Our intelligence and our military have developed along the way, and President Obama gets great credit for it, and he had the courage to let the drones go on the Pakistan side of the border, but so does George Bush, who nurtured these kinds of things as well. I don't think this is something where one gets the credit and one doesn't just because the assassination, the elimination of Bin Laden occurred under the President Obama's watch. We're much better at it. We know more. And so when the authorities tell us that they haven't detected any, any chatterings on the wires or whatever else, it's a pretty good indication, not perfect. The danger we face is much more likely from individual terrorists like the Times Square bomber, who act on their own, than from organized groups, which we pretty much have a good idea of what they're doing and what's going on. The final thing I'd say is to the families. They have suffered so, and their suffering isn't going to go away. There's a hole in their hearts that will remain forever. We know that. But many of them expressed to me, one person said to me, every day, this was about a year ago, every day I think of the fact that my husband is dead and bin Laden is alive. When are we going to get him? That awful thought, which can play in your mind if you were in her situation, is no longer a thought that has to be at all entertained by the families, and that is a good thing. So is there some closure for them? Yes. Will the hole in their heart ever go away? No. But their strength has been amazing. And I'd finally say one more thing. The day after 9/11, Senator Clinton and I flew up and we toured the damage and smelled the death in the air. And in an emotional moment, I said, I think every American should wear the flag. And people did. And I put on this flag, and I've worn it every day in my lapel since. And God willing, I will every day in the future. But I've never felt prouder to wear this flag than I feel this morning. So, thank you. Okay, well, it's sort of appropriate, isn't it, that bin Laden sought to destroy our city, and I'm here giving a speech on how to strengthen our city. He's gone, we're here, we're growing, and growing stronger. And that, I think, says it all. So I thought about it a little bit and talked over with my wife, who's here, Iris Weinschall, whether I should not give the speech. And in her usual wisdom, she said, of course you should give the speech. That's what it's all about. So here I am, and here it goes. Okay. And what I want to talk about today is something, as you all know, I care so much about, which is the future of this great city, maintaining New York's status as the global economic capital as we move forward in the 21st century in our innovation economy. As you know, while we still have a great deal of work to do, New York's weathered the current economic storm better than most of the country. We didn't see the lows that many other regions in the country did. We bounced back more quickly than many people expected when the recession hit. And much of that is attributable to the fact that we have a remarkably diversified economy. We are the preeminent finance capital, but we're also the publishing capital, the legal capital, the fashion capital, the accounting capital, the media capital, the art capital, the healthcare capital, a major research center. Wherever human capital is a key ingredient, New York and New Yorkers succeed and flourish. So given its importance, I thought I'd say a word, this is not the topic of my speech, about the state of financial services in New York, which is still, in terms of income generation, thank you. Salute. Cheers to New York. About the financial services in New York, which still is our greatest income producer. It was clear in the light of the crisis of 2008 we needed to do something. Our city lost tens of thousands of jobs, billions of dollars in income, because there were far too many holes in our regulatory system. People who are today saying New York won't grow because of the new law that passed are forgetting New York shrunk dramatically because we didn't have any law to deal with many of the holding companies and excesses that occurred. So we needed to do financial regulation, but it's a difficult tightrope to walk for two reasons. First, we needed to make sure that there wasn't too much riskiness because it spreads beyond any one firm, and that there was somebody looking over the shoulder of these firms when systemic risk beckoned. But at the same time, if we overreacted, two things would happen, both bad. We'd stifle entrepreneurialism, and we'd encourage businesses to flee overseas, to London, to Asia, and we'd lose out. So we had to thread the needle. We needed smart, appropriate regulation. Excuse me. And I think we've done that. While some feared that in light of the Dodd-Frank bill, we might begin to lose market share in this vital industry. The reverse has proven true. Since Dodd-Frank, not only has financial services grown, and the rate of growth is increasing, but we've actually gained market share over London and other places, Europe, as investors have become more confident in New York. There's still work to do. In writing the bill, when there was a really difficult issue that Congress might not have handled very intelligently, we punted it to the regulators. We said, let the regulators decide. So they have a whole lot of say in many of these issues. And I speak to them regularly, Secretary Geithner, Chairman Bernanke, once a week on these issues to make sure they're continuing to thread that needle in an appropriate way. And additionally, we have to remain watchful of competitors in Asia. I don't think there's much danger that Europe would go to the lowest common denominator. In fact, if anything, their regulations on salaries and certain kinds of capital requirements help create a more favorable environment for New York. But Singapore, Hong Kong are flirting with this lowest common denominator. And we have to be really careful about that because so many of these things can go anywhere in a world of electronics. The one thing I can tell you is I believe that Secretary Geithner is very much aware of this, and in our conversations we talk about it a lot. So much for financial services. The depth of our human capital and our ability to adapt to changing times has been one of the keys to our region's success and vitality. As a region, we've always adapted to the new circumstances, and that's why we've thrived. We don't stay the same. So, we began as a fur trading outpost. We built the Erie Canal and became the dominant trade center in the United States. When railroads began to shift the center of gravity away from the canals and stuff, we continued to thrive, not only as a finance center, but a manufacturing center. What people forget is for most of the 20th century, guess which city had more manufacturing jobs than any other city in the world? New York. Once again, when the economy shifted and manufacturing moved, first to other parts of the United States and then overseas, New York adapted as well. While many of the older industrial cities in the country went into decline and never recovered, we maintained our status as a global economic capital. One, because of diversification, not depending on any one industry, but also by expanding into other newer industries, most of which depended on human capital, like media, law, business services. Now, today we stand at another turning point with another challenge. How are we going to adapt to the 21st century innovation economy? That's the topic of my speech. And this is a challenge for us as a nation and a region. My goal for America as a whole is that we become the production giant, not the consumption giant. In other words, if you look at the financial crisis, it's easy to blame one person, one company, one individual, one group, one industry. But to me, the number one reason we failed is for 15 years we produced more than we consumed more than we produced. We borrowed more than we saved. We imported more than we exported. We were like a giant astride the globe with big muscles, stuffing our face with cake. We have to continue to produce new goods and new products while we're also nurturing and keeping strong our existing industries. New York is the second largest recipient of high-tech venture capital in the country. We just surpassed Boston. Venture capital, a great indication of new startup high-tech companies. We're second to the San Francisco area. Google last year, we all know this, spent $2 billion to buy a headquarters in New York. They have over 2,000 employees. They're growing every week. Last year, Eric Schmidt told me his Google employees in New York were his most productive employees, even more productive than those in Mountain View, California. And it's not just the large high-tech firms. For every large high-tech firm, there are scores of smaller ones. And I meet these people all the time. How many people in your company? 20, 30. How many 6 months ago? 2 or 3. How many do you expect in a year? 100, 150. They're growing. New York, the New York metropolitan region, has more workers in high tech than any region in the country. 300,000 men and women, 22,000 firms that are classified as high technology companies. More than Silicon Valley, more than Boston, more than Washington, because the high-tech industry has sort of switched. When it started, it was a hardware-based industry, based on how good a computer you could build and all these, chips and techniques like that. But the second generation is software. And software plays to New York's strengths, where we're good creatively. A lot of software is aimed at advertising. We're the advertising capital. A lot of it's aimed at marketing and design and even law and finance. In a software and content-driven world, New York's a natural center. This year alone, Terry Lundgren, the head of Macy's, told me that they were going to focus their online business in New York. And they're growing by 400 people who are going to help Macy's, market all their stuff online. In the past, those jobs would have gone to Boston or San Francisco. So, what do we need to do if we're going to continue to nurture these strengths? Maybe one day high tech will be as big as finance or advertising or law. But we have to make sure we continue to be a magnet for talented young people all across America. Since 1990, young, talented people want to be here. New York gained 1 million people between 1990 and 2000. We actually probably gained 400,000 or 500,000 between 2000 and 2010, but the Census Bureau lists places like Jackson Heights as having huge numbers of empty apartments. Makes no sense, but they did it. Anyway, we're growing, and lots of these young people come here. Young people want to be in New York more than ever before. Right now, if you're a middle-class family with 3 kids living in Denver or Chicago or Phoenix, the odds are one of your kids wants to be in New York. One of the things that hit me, made me think about this and start studying it, I asked senators how many, if they had kids in New York. At last count, over a dozen senators, including a guy like Mike Crapo, Mormon from Idaho, has 2 kids in New York. They come because there are good jobs here. There are good jobs here because they come. But there are a few other things we have to do. Why did it change between 1990 and now? In part because the crime rate went way down. Young people were afraid to come to New York. Just look at Columbia and NYU, 2 of our great institutions. Once their parents thought it was safe to send them here, they started coming in droves. Even now, City University, Iris, is getting people from out of the city to come because of its excellence. But the crime rate helped make that happen. And it's to the mayor and Commissioner Kelly's credit and Mayor Giuliani's credit that crime rates have continued to come down and down and down. We're the lowest in crime of 25 biggest cities. And the studies show that young people, they look at that. Is it safe? Because they want to be out and about. Second, we have to continue to support our great universities, obviously. Columbia, NYU, City University, and so many others. Ambitious young people come here and then they stay. The number one reason young people come to New York is economic opportunity, but they're also drawn to the vibrant, unparalleled cultural life of our city. Supporting the arts is an economic imperative. The head of a major financial company told me the reason he gets the best employees to come from business schools and places all around the country is because the Metropolitan Museum of Art is here. And one Sunday a few summers ago, I was riding through Williamsburg, and I saw literally thousands of young people, yuppies like, lined up in Williamsburg. Where were they going? Well, this entrepreneur had used New York City park space to create something called the Jelly Pool Park Concerts, and it had all the most indie bands. Rachel Yamagata, the something girls, I forgot their name. Indy, I'm not. Although my daughter taught me to like Florence and the Machine, who's coming to Central Park, June 24th. I have to speak at a graduation on Long Island. I can't go. So we have to make sure our young people come and stay. And two other things, I'm not going to get into those. Affordable housing. A lot of that's happening, but we need to do something to make sure it continues to happen. And frankly, we can't cap taxes. We don't have to have the lowest taxes in the world. We don't have to be like Texas or Florida. But if the taxes get too high, even these young people say, I'm going to go somewhere else. So, you know, I think at the federal level, it's a different issue than at the state level in terms of how high you can raise taxes. Because federally, people don't go, you know, to England or New Zealand because of tax rates. But they'll go to Connecticut, New Jersey, Florida, Texas, wherever, because of tax rates. So that's important too. Okay. Now, next, even as we build on the human capital we've always attracted, we have to improve in some areas that haven't been strong. Here are a couple of areas where we need to improve, not just maintain or get better. First, we've never sufficiently capitalized on the research institutions we have in this city and this region. The success of Silicon Valley, high tech, biotech in Boston is not because they have smarter people or better schools or more skilled investors, but they've done a better job fostering a culture of entrepreneurialism in their scientific and research communities. For all of our tremendous assets, the elite universities, the top-notch medical research centers, the skilled investment community, we haven't done enough. We haven't provided enough of the nutrient agar so that the people who work there want to start businesses and are able to start businesses in our city. There's no reason we can't do that. And I want to give you one little example that no one knows about. Guess where chips, you know, that make all the computers and cell phones and all that, guess what has become the chip fab capital of America? You'll never guess. Albany, New York. Whoa. It was due to one man, more or less. His name was Alan Kaliyeros. He was a professor at University of Albany, and he had a dream to do this. The first thing he did, and this is a model for us, he established a center for nanoscale engineering and the science of computer chip fabrication in Albany. Governor Pataki got him some money. Senator Bruno got him some money. And I got him some money. And the research, also fostered by IBM, another important, because they didn't want to be just dependent on Intel. They're a great New York company, and if they were just dependent on Intel, they were stuck. So they wanted to make sure other chip fabs came. And it worked. Chip fab companies around the world now want to be in Albany because we have the best research. They have 3,000 people working on the University of Albany campus, SUNY Albany campus, doing chip fab. Private companies are allowed to build by space right next to where the professors are in incubators. And the biggest private real estate project in America is in Saratoga Springs, where AMD is building the most advanced chip fab plant in the world for $12 billion. I went to China. They're talking about this. I was just in China. They're talking about what's going on in Albany. And now, additionally, the same technology that allows you to make chips the quickest and best and cheapest goes into photovoltaic cells. The largest federal grant to do research to make the transition from silicon to thin film in photovoltaic cells, which will make them cheaper and allow us to make them rather than China making them, went to SUNY Albany. $57 million. We beat out Stanford and MIT. So another industry is going to grow, and Albany is growing at much faster than the national average. And when you think that's impressive in itself, but when government employees go down, which they have been, that's even more impressive. And Semitech, one other point here, going on too much on this, but boy, I love it. Semitech, which is the federal private consortium to making chips, they just moved from Austin, Texas to Albany, New York. Second, Mayor Bloomberg had a great idea that didn't get enough attention. We need engineering schools, and we need the top-notch engineering schools in New York. He deserves a lot of credit for this. He's always thinking about how the city should grow, and I really respect that. I have to say this, and maybe people will be a little upset. We have great engineering institutions here, but they don't put out enough engineers. Columbia, NYU, Cooper Union. But just because a school like Stanford, which is enthusiastic about coming here, is not from New York, we shouldn't rule them out. They're eager to put a lot of money, and they have had skill in taking engineers and turning them into entrepreneurs. So this is a real imperative for our city. We have to do it. The final thing I want to talk about is a federal law, but that will help New York and help us keep our high-tech businesses. Immigration. Just as people around America want to come to New York, people all over the world want to come to New York. And one of the reasons they want to come is to go to our schools. We have great schools, higher education. And many of them want to stay. And guess what we do? In America and in New York, this is a national law I'm talking about, but it'll affect New York more than anywhere else because we do the best with immigrants in attracting them and keeping them, because we have a diverse culture and we like immigrants, and if you look a little different or talk a little different in New York, that's regarded as an asset as opposed to a liability that it's regarded in other parts of the country. So they know that, and they want to come. We send them home. My big daughter had a roommate who was the daughter of the Turkish cable magnate, like the Malone of Turkey. And she was a computer genius and had a great job at Goldman Sachs after she graduated. And because H-1B visas expired on May 28th, but her graduation date was June 4th, she had to go home. We can't have that anymore. So I have proposed, and this relates to our engineers as well, that every graduate who comes to America who gets an MA or PhD, and I'm thinking of expanding it to BA, in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, gets a green card the day they get their diploma. That would be amazing for our businesses nationwide, but it would really help our companies here. And my plea to you as business leaders, we need the business community to get behind this. You've stayed out of the immigration debate. The Chamber of Commerce is about to support the more comprehensive proposal that I've been working on, and this is a major part of it. And they're backing off because some of the low-end industries, not, the high-tech industries love this, financial services love this, all of our industries love it. But if you're a hotel company or a, you do small bore construction, you don't like this. You don't want to let immigrants in because you're happy to have illegal workers do some of these jobs. And we have to change that. We can become the high-tech center. We have all the ingredients. We need a few things. Encourage our institutions to do what Albany did in major areas. Biotech is one of them, but there are many others. Get a major new engineering school that will produce thousands of top-flight engineers, and once they come here and study here and stay here, and change our immigration laws. And if we can do those three things, I believe that New York will be the high-tech center in the 21st century, and we will continue to be what we all want us to be, the greatest city in the world. Thank you.